Tacitus, the 48th emperor of the Roman Empire, reigned from AD 275 to 276. His tenure was short, lasting only a year, but it marked a notable moment in a turbulent period of Roman history. His reign occurred during the crisis of the 3rd century, a time when the Roman Empire was in significant turmoil, plagued by military anarchy, economic instability, and external threats. Despite the brevity of his rule, Tacitus's reign is often remembered as a brief period of recovery and relative stability for the empire. Tacitus was born into a prominent senatorial family, likely in the early 230s AD. His full name was Marcus Claudius Tacitus, and he was related to several high-ranking Roman officials. He came from the region of the province of Gaul, which had become an important area of the empire by the time of his birth. His family held high offices during the reign of the Severan emperors, and Tacitus himself was positioned for a career in the imperial administration. Tacitus was known for his distinguished military and political career. Before becoming emperor, he had held various positions in the Roman military and civil service. His experience in both the military and as a civil administrator would later aid him in handling the challenges that came with ruling the empire. Tacitus became emperor during a particularly chaotic period in Roman history known as the crisis of the 3rd century, 235 to 284 AD. This era saw a series of short-lived emperors, frequent military uprisings, external invasions, economic disarray, and internal power struggles. The empire's borders were under constant threat from barbarian groups such as the Goths and Persians. The frequent changes in leadership and the military's increasing influence over the empire created an unstable environment. At the time of Tacitus's accession, the empire was reeling from the aftermath of Emperor Aurelian's death and the subsequent instability caused by the lack of a strong successor. The military, which had grown significantly powerful during the 3rd century, had a strong influence on the selection of emperors, and Tacitus was chosen largely because he had the backing of the army. Tacitus came to the throne after the death of Aurelian. His ascent to power was facilitated by his military background and his support from the Senate and the army. It was believed that Tacitus was proclaimed emperor by the troops, who were eager for a strong leader to continue the work of Aurelian, particularly his efforts to restore the empire's borders and stabilize the internal situation. One of the key factors that made Tacitus appealing to the soldiers was his military experience. Tacitus had served in various high-ranking military positions, and he had proven himself as a capable leader in handling military campaigns. Additionally, his senatorial connections ensured that he had a strong relationship with the Roman elite, who were crucial in securing his rule. Tacitus's reign was marked by efforts to stabilize the empire after years of crisis. While much of his reign was consumed by the ongoing military threats from barbarian invasions, Tacitus made notable progress in restoring some measure of order. One of Tacitus's first challenges as emperor was addressing the ongoing conflict with the Goths, a Germanic tribe that had invaded the empire in large numbers. In 275, the Gothic tribes were threatening the eastern provinces of the empire. Tacitus responded by organizing military campaigns in an attempt to repel the invaders. Despite his efforts, Tacitus was unable to decisively defeat the Goths. Nonetheless, his military efforts were seen as a necessary part of the ongoing struggle to defend the empire's borders. Tacitus also worked on stabilizing the internal administration of the empire. He sought to strengthen the authority of the Senate and reduce the growing power of the military. Tacitus was likely aware that the military's dominance was a double-edged sword. While it could ensure the empire's security, it also posed a threat to the political structure if the military were to become too powerful. Additionally, Tacitus attempted to address some of the economic issues that had plagued the empire during the crisis. However, his attempts at reform were limited by the ongoing military conflicts and the fractured state of the empire. Although he was able to maintain some degree of stability, the broader crisis of the 3rd century made it difficult to enact long-term reforms. Tacitus's reign ended abruptly in 276 AD when he died under mysterious circumstances. There is no definitive account of his death, but some sources suggest that he was either assassinated by members of his own court or succumbed to an illness. The suddenness of his death further exemplified the volatility of the era. After his death, the imperial throne passed to his cousin Florian, who would also have a brief reign. Tacitus's death marked the end of his short reign, but it did not end the challenges facing the Roman Empire. Following his death, the empire would continue to be plagued by instability until the eventual rise of Diocletian, who would bring about significant reforms in the late 3rd century and usher in a period of relative stability. Tacitus's legacy is primarily defined by the brevity and the nature of his reign. He is often remembered as an emperor who took steps to stabilize a crumbling empire, but who was ultimately unable to bring about long-lasting reforms. His efforts to defend the empire from external threats and maintain internal order were admirable, but the challenges of the 3rd century proved too great for any single emperor to fully resolve. Despite the shortness of his reign, Tacitus is often viewed as a symbol of the brief glimmers of stability that could emerge even during the most chaotic periods of Roman history. His reign marked an attempt to continue the work of Aurelian, particularly in terms of defending the empire's borders, but it also highlighted the fragility of the empire at this time. Tacitus's reign was followed by the rise of his successor Florian, who also had a brief and largely unremarkable reign. Ultimately, it was the Emperor Diocletian a few decades later who would bring an end to the crisis of the 3rd century and lay the groundwork for the later division of the Roman Empire into the Eastern and Western Roman empires. In conclusion, Tacitus was a relatively minor emperor in the grand scope of Roman history. His reign was defined by the challenges of the 3rd century, and while he took steps to address these issues, his efforts were ultimately limited by the larger forces at play. Still, his rule remains an important example of the persistence of the Roman Empire during one of its most difficult periods.